Lisa, good to see you today.
Hi, Ron.
So I wanted to bring you on because I read your book, Get Speaking Gigs Now, and you know that that's something that I really like to help speakers to do. I kind of consider myself to be the amplifier of a speaker. If we were to think of a stereo, there's the speakers that make all the noise, but then there's the amplifier that enables that speaker to work. And that's kind of what I think our job is at Speaker Hub. So when I read your book, I thought you gave some very practical advice. And I was like, you know what? I would love for you to come speak at our event to share how other speakers can get on more stages and basically turn one gig into five or one gig into multiple gigs. So, um, to start off, tell me a little bit about how you became a speaker and how you started working with speakers.
Well, back in the day, in the 90s, oh my gosh, in the 90s, I actually majored in speech communication. I got my bachelor's and master's in speech communication. So I'm 24 years old. I've got my master's degree and all the vim and vigor and enthusiasm of a college graduate, and no job that felt like it really fit what I wanted to do. And so I went into different careers, whether it was sales, business ownership, real estate investing, all different kinds of activities. And uh, I led, I was an executive leader for a university. I still didn't forget that I really wanted to speak and teach. And I was hired by a personal development company as I started my soul searching to speak in order to get clients. And I thought I had arrived. Like, this is exactly what I would love to do. I would love to go out and speak and use my sales expertise in order to generate clients for a product and service that I really believe in. Well, that first year, I booked 83 speaking engagements, and this was in my, in Southern California. Yeah, this was in Southern California.
What?
And Ron, I would say that was what we would call ignorance on fire, if you've ever heard that phrase before, because I wasn't aware of how it all worked. I didn't know what was right or wrong. I just went for it. I just was like, I have an important message for people. I'm going to find people who want to hear that message, and I'm going to invite them to go on this journey with me. That worked. It really worked. But I did, of course, start to learn along the way. And I had created a speaker network, and all the speakers in the network would always ask me for help. How did you get so many gigs, Lisa? What did you do to get that gig, Lisa? It took me a while, and I mean a couple of years, to really own that and hear that of like, gosh, there's a gap. There is like a gap in the marketplace here for the person who's trying to make it happen. And they're just sort of on their own in their, in front of their laptop, trying to figure out, how do I get out on that stage? How do I get that microphone in my hand? And there's no one really to teach them that part. So that's when I started Get Speaking Gigs Now. And now I've given over 600 talks, and help support people in getting their talk ready to rock, and really understanding what is their best strategy for them, not the one that everyone else is doing, but what is their actual strategy. And I think that's very valuable to have as an entrepreneur.
83 over what time period?
That was in the first year. That was back
Yeah,
in
that's
2000, like from 2013. I started May 2013. So like to May 2014 was 83. Yeah.
yeah, that's about two a week, right? And
Uh, yeah.
it's roughly two a week, which is impressive. And were all of these paid gigs, or were some of them free up front? And when I say paid, I mean paid up front, because I know you
Yeah,
can
I know
get
what you
paid
mean.
in different ways. But
Yeah, no, they weren't. And because that wasn't my goal, this is where speaking industry is so fascinating. My goal was not to get a paid speaking gig. My goal was to find a group of people who would allow me to make an offer and bring clients into the company. So I would bring in hundreds of new clients into the company every year. And that was my goal. So I was really focused on that. And it's funny because looking back now, I mean, I would hand out pieces of paper, put your credit card on there. It was $300, sign up now every single time. And so I didn't realize at the time, oh, I could have offered something for free or gotten created an email list. I mean, there were so many things that I learned, but I would say that what I started with was actually harder than what I do now. So it's kind of nice sometimes when you do the hard work first and it gets all easy after that.
But when you think about it, I mean, I remember I got my first email account and there was no graphic interface like where you could see things. And this was in 1997 when I was a freshman, 1996 when I was a freshman at University of Illinois, right? And Windows wasn't even like the standard operating system yet. Like everybody didn't have a computer. I didn't get a computer until my senior year of college. Think about how like
I hear that.
that sounds weird now, considering that we keep laptops and computers in our pockets, you know. But so I can understand why you probably didn't collect an email address because nobody had them. Nobody.
Well, I mean, they had them back then, but yeah, it just we weren't set up for it in a way, and so I was working with a company that had been around, and now they're like 30 something years old. So the good news and bad news about working with a company that's been around a long time, they have great authority and credibility, but they were had some older models of marketing. And so I was like, okay, I guess that's how we're going to do it. And so we did. And
No, that makes
it
sense.
worked.
Were you
Ironically.
were you reaching out to people? Were you stopping by their office? Were you getting referrals? What was your method of securing those 83?
That first year was definitely cold calling, and we had this booklet, I remember now, it was this little booklet that would come out, it was in paper, a little booklet that would come out once a year with all these in that area, all the speaking engagements, people who would have you come in, have an outside speaker come in. And so I would literally go through the book and I would just email them or call them and I would say like, "Hey, I saw that you have an event and you might be looking for speakers. Would you be the person that I should chat with about that?" And they would say, "Oh, Bob's in charge of that. Let me give you a cell phone number." I'm like, "Cha-ching, thank you."
so so at that point you just reached out to Bob and
I
you
said,
got
"Hey,
a
Bob."
referral when you
Yeah.
hey Bob, Jesse told me to contact you.
100%. But, not everyone's brave enough to do that. I will say it does take some gumption. I also will say that's not my favorite way to get speaking engagements. I did that, but because I was good at it, it's one of like zone of excellence, but not zone of genius.
Mhm.
I was good at that. But the network is really where I started to realize, oh, I don't need to work this hard to do this anymore. And I haven't done cold reach out for probably 10 years now.
Gotcha. So how did you build that network?
Well, one of my zones of genius is bringing people together. And so I thought, gosh, I would love to collaborate with other speakers because it's just a lot easier when we're all together doing this journey. We can learn from each other. I can provide content and support and referrals and I bet they could too. So I just started asking people. There was nothing in our area. We used to meet in person. There was nothing in the area at the time and people just would come. They'd come from, I lived in Orange County. I still live in Orange County, California, which is Southern California. People would drive from San Diego, Los Angeles, Inland Empire. All of people would fly in for our meetings. And it was just a powerful room to be in. And there's something so magical about bringing like minded people together that we started to build a referral base and connections. And now we meet virtually. So I just say, show up, be the person in the room next to all the people that can get you the thing that you want, right? That's certainly one strategy of that you could add to your arsenal to make it so not so lonely.
Let's say I'm just starting off, right? And I think what you do is a perfect match for what I do, right? Because I do cold outreach. But once you get that one, the best thing is to turn that into referrals, right? So it's like you turn one gig that you worked hard for into 5, 6, 7 gigs that are leveraged off of that one. How does someone approach that? So let's say I did a really good job speaking at this event. How do I approach turning that into other gigs, whether from the host or from people in the audience? How do I go about doing
There's a few ways. So what I want to do is let's over deliver today, Ron. Let's not even turn it into 4, but let's turn it to like 50, right? So imagine that you're a speaker listening to this and you're like, I would love to turn one speaking engagement that I worked really hard for or not into 50. So if you happen to have potential clients in an association, members of an association, let's say maybe engineers are your clients or real estate or insurance people, something like that. And you speak at one association meeting in your local area, let's just say, or your nearest metropolitan area. More than likely, they have an association or chapter in multiple states, if not nearly all of the states, and they certainly, like say in California, they have usually 5 or 6, maybe 10 chapters in that one state. So once you speak to one association and you know that that's a fit, like, oh man, my clients are definitely in this room, or wow, they paid me to come and speak, whichever one, whatever model you're using, you can immediately have credibility with the association down the street, the chapter down the street, or they might even have a list if you've been really kind and you've shown up in a very professional way to that chapter meeting president, for example. They might even just hand you the list of people. They might even recommend you in an email to that neighbor chapter or to the regional event or to their national event. I mean, honestly, you can milk one lead and squeeze so much lemon or so much juice out of that lemon, right?
it? Well, I mean, there's still lemon in a lemon.
There's still lemon in the lemon. That's right.
So squeeze all the lemon out of the lemon. I
Get
get
the
it.
lemon out of the lemon.
No, I think that that makes sense. So let's kind of talk about, you know, if you were if you were a new speaker, right? What would be the steps you would follow?
If I was a new speaker, 100%, you need to what I call get your talk ready to rock. This is something that I believe in so much. Yes, it's a chapter in the book, it's a module in my curriculum, it's a one-on-one service. I have it in a boot camp. I mean, like, I am serious as a heart attack. If you don't have a talk that you love, that you can't wait to share with the world, you don't have the right talk yet. Because if you're not excited about it, no one's going to be excited about it. And when I say get your talk ready to rock, it's really about being super clear on your call to action if you're a platform speaker or using speaking to gain clients. Um, you can even have a call to action as a keynote speaker. That call to action might look differently. It might mean something inspirational or something very relevant to the audience. It doesn't mean it has to be a sales thing. So you want to have a call to action. You want to have clear learning points that the audience would show up for. They would be interested in that. The booker, whoever's booking you, would be like, wow, yes, that would be so valuable for our audience. We can't wait to
Mhm.
have you. That's what we're looking for. And then, of course, a description that backs up your learning points, and then your title that backs up the description and the learning points and the call to action. And you may have noticed I went backwards. A lot of times people start, when they think of their talk, they start with the title even before they have the talk created. I'm like, well, how would you know the title until you know what your talk is going to be about? So I say we'll start at the end. The end is the beginning, and the beginning is the end. And we'll put the title right on top, just like the bride and groom or whoever's on top of the wedding cake these days. Whoever that couple is, we're going to put that on at the end.
Gotcha. So once they rock their talk, then what do they do?
Then what we want to do is figure out, and it's just simultaneous as you're figuring out your talk. You're identifying who's your target audience, right? Like, what does that look like? I call it a speaking avatar, meaning like, do you want to speak virtually? Are you speaking in person primarily? Do you love to travel? Do you not want to travel? Are you going paid keynote speaking? Are you going speak to sell? Are you doing a combination of both? Maybe it's podcasts, summits, whatever works for you or what makes the most sense for your lifestyle, for your business, that needs to be identified. Like, where are those people hanging out? Because not every speaker is a fit for every speaking engagement. Obviously, there's a huge range, not only of speakers, there's a huge range of speaking engagements as well. It's kind of like if you're single and someone says, "Oh, I know someone who's single." That does not mean that you should go on a date with them. You need to find out a little more information. Same with speaking. I gotta find out that information. And so as you're I equate it to like setting the dinner table, like getting dinner out on the table. You're doing things at different times, but it somehow all gets onto the table at the same time. So you're getting your talk created, but you're also figuring out, well, where would I go speak? Would that look like? And then you're tapping into things like Speaker Hub of like, well, where can I start to create a speaking gig pipeline? Like, where are these speaking engagements? Maybe you don't know anybody. Okay, well then you're sitting on a great resource there to tap into and see like, where can I start reaching out? But you don't really want to start reaching out until you're ready because they're going to ask you, what's your topic? Okay, send us your description, send us your learning points, send us your bio, send us your headshot. So there's some homework that needs to be taken care of before you jump in to reach out, in my opinion.
No, I 100% agree. I think um, we teach a concept called the speaker flywheel, which when you're first starting off, when you're trying to discover what that talk is or what that exciting thing is, the best way to discover that is through podcast because you get to answer some questions, you get to have a dialogue with people from different perspectives. So then you can say, "Man, I really got excited about this part," or you can listen to it and get feedback, and then hear where your voice and your energy went up in different interviews, and that may be your zone of genius. So we always say, "Hey, start off with something where you can discover what that key talk is, and then you use a smaller gig like you were doing, going to small associations and practicing that talk and watching how the world reacts to it, right?
Mhm.
And once you start finding out their feedback, then move on to the bigger stages. So I 100% agree with you that those are the best steps to take. So what do they do next? What's the third thing?
Well, then we want to make sure you get your speaker sheet created. And when I say speaker sheet, that can take many forms. It might be your media kit, it might be a PDF, a digital PDF or a page on your site or all of the above. There's all different ways that one can
Mm-hmm.
have a speaker sheet now. Again, that's going to be the information that more than likely anyone who's booking you is going to ask for. So you want to be able to have that in multiple ways to deliver that to the person. And there's something empowering about having that in your pocket, like metaphorically speaking, because then you're not suffering from any what I call speaker's kryptonite. Like, oh my gosh, I hope they don't ask me for, fill in the blank. I hope they don't want to see my speaker sheet, website, speaker page, video, whatever it is that you're afraid they're going to ask you for. You want to have that ready. You want to have that ready to go so that you can move confidently. Another thing that I recommend people do when they if we go back to the getting your talk created is utilizing those learning points when you're on a podcast because then you get used to, especially if you're new, you then get used to saying it and it gets easier and the transitions get easier. You also might find that you come across a funny story or a story that's really relevant that you didn't really realize was there. So using that podcast experience, not just for exposure, but also, like you said, the practice of sharing your message in different ways and different forms. And that helps to create the unconscious competence that we're all striving for. Like, wow, I want to be able to deliver my information wherever I am. I would say like I want you to be able to deliver your talk in a boat with a goat, in a box with a fox, just they ask you to go, you can go. Even if the electricity went out, I want you to be able to do it.
No, I think that's important because some places they're going to open it up for question and answer. And if you haven't been questioned or challenged on what you're talking about, even if it's non-confrontational in a podcast interview, you don't know the context to get that story in a concise way where because you may not have all day to answer it. So by going on the podcast, you learn to answer in sound bites in some ways so that if you ever are in a situation where you're in a Q and A, you know your topic frontwards and backwards. I think that that's a really big deal, and use those smaller gigs to record your one sheets and the things that you were mentioning. Get your speaker reel from the smaller gigs. If you don't have a gig yet, use the podcast as your speaker reel. So go on a podcast, then send them the link to the podcast. Hey, you can hear me talking about it on this show, and they can, oh, okay, he's not cursing people out. He's not rude. She's not disrespectful. Oh, that is an interesting perspective. I would love for her to come and go deeper into that. So yeah, I like that. That when I was going through the book and I was listening to how you put things together, I was like, man, this is right up my alley. I really agree with a lot of your teaching. So
Oh, thank you.
it's
Yeah,
a
another
big deal.
thing when you're starting out too for video reels, if you happen to get a engagement that's in person, buy a tripod off of Amazon, put your phone on there, get the footage. It's raw footage. You could always have somebody edit some of that pieces in, take some of the audio, or at least grab a still like a picture that you were on a certain stage and start to stack up like, oh, I was on X amount of stages. That's a great way to do it. And you can upload it to your YouTube channel, and you don't have to have it public. You can have it private, and then if someone asks you for a sample, you can give that to them. It's all that costs $20. Like, it's not, I know that's not the tippy top. Like, yes, do you ideally want a professional videographer to make it all fancy? Yes, of course, that's the pinnacle. But sometimes we're starting at different levels, different budgets. There's only so many things you could do at the same time. So you can work your way up to different um, video clips. Yeah.
100%. It doesn't have to be anything outrageous. It just needs the person needs to try you on,
Yeah.
right?
Proof of
So there
concept.
was a guy, someone was selling shoes, right? And this guy was like, "Yo, man, I got an extra pair of shoes that I bought for my son, but they're not the right size for him. Is it something you would be interested in?" And I was like, "I don't really know." He was like, "Well, I got them. You want to try them on?" No, he grabbed the shoes. He handed them to me. I tried them on. They fit. I bought them. I wasn't in a shoe store. He didn't have the shoe measuring thing, but he was willing to let me try them on,
Nice.
right? And a lot of times the host just needs to try you on. And that could be through an Instagram reel, it could be through a video that you sent over to Fiverr to get edited, but they got to have some way to try you out. And I think that that's a really big deal. It doesn't need to be ideal because you'll always get better, right? But it needs to be available.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the big things,
I have
you
a
know?
story about that. When I got an email one day, and in the subject line, in all caps, it says, "We want you," like exclamation, exclamation. I thought, oh, that's kind of a weird subject line. What is this email? And I opened it, and it didn't seem spammy, and it didn't seem dangerous. So I opened it, and it was because I had sent them an 8-minute clip. They wanted to see, was there a recent time you spoke? And I said, oh, I just spoke at this women event. It's like 8 minutes. Would you want to see that? They said, yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's just on my iPhone, it wasn't edited or anything like that. And I sent it, and that was the response I got back the next day. They immediately wanted me to come and speak because they were able to see the energy of the audience. It wasn't anything fancy, but just sometimes that alone is all that you need.
100%. It's like I said, when I tried on that guy's shoes, I didn't go run a marathon in them.
Yeah,
I just made sure my toes didn't hurt and that they looked nice on me, right? It's amazing how much a little bit of underlying audio helps. Like you can take a 2-minute clip and just you talking, putting some music underneath, and it sounds incredible because the music evokes the emotion that you were trying to convey in your point, and you're like, yeah, I'm ready to go,
that's a
so
great tip.
I think the speaker reel is and collateral is really important, but if you don't have those things, don't wait until you have them. Still be pitching and getting yourself out there, but when you get a chance to get on a stage, get it. Even if it's
Yeah,
a Zoom call, you can record Zoom calls. Always ask for permission to record the Zoom calls, because in Zoom they let you have speaker view, where even though there's 50 people in the room, you can just zoom in on yourself on your computer and your recording, and you can end up with
Well, and you can even
your
just record
speaking.
yourself. Like you don't even need to do it in front of a live audience. If you, I mean, these days you can literally deliver your own talk and record it with no one there as if people were there. And that could be something you could use. So we all have
How do you do
capability
that?
to do that.
Tell me how to do that.
Oh, you just open up your Zoom room and have your slides ready. I mean, you can if you're going to use slides, you just share your slides. You're going to be in that little top corner. You hit record on a PC. It's alt button and then R is a nice way to do it because then you're not like kind of searching the mouse all over to where is this record. You just hit Alt R when you're ready to start and it starts recording and you do your thing. Teach your, share your slides if you want. Teach your thing. You could be as short or as long as you want. Up to you. And then when you're done, you hit Alt record and that shuts it off. Then you download it as a video and there you go. That's
Yeah, I never would have thought about that. That's actually
it.
pretty cool. Like, I mean, it's so many different ways. Like, there's just no excuses nowadays. You
There's
know.
not. There really isn't. And then you can upload that to your YouTube or what, cut it up. You could do all kinds of things with that. So there's
So
lots of ways for beginners to start.
how would you ask for referrals? So let's say, for instance, I just did a small gig, and there was 20 people in the room, and let's say I wanted to somehow get referrals out of the audience.
Yeah.
How do I do that?
So one of the concepts is a concept called seeding, like you're going to plant a seed, right? This is what I would do because typically when I'm speaking, getting speaking referrals isn't my top priority. It's not the top thing that I want them to leave with, but I am absolutely fine with opening the door of like, oh, I'm open to speaking at other places. So it's not going to be my offer, my call to action necessarily. Some people have that. That's fine. But I will seed it where maybe even in my intro, it'll say she's given over 600 talks. Or sometimes it might say where I've spoken before. Or I might use it as a case study. When I was speaking at XYZ organization, this is what we, you know, came out of it. Or here's a woman came up to me after she had heard me speak at XYZ. So those are all little examples of how you can seed it without it feeling salesy or creepy. And then all of a sudden someone's like, oh my gosh, we have an organization like that. We need a speaker. And they'll usually come up, if it's in person, they'll come up to you after. Or, I mean, you could certainly, if you have a table, you could have something there at the table saying like, if you'd like me to speak somewhere, put your card in, something like that. Some of these are a little old school because now with digital, we could do we could do a lot of different ways in which you can access these kind of leads. You might use one of the Talkadot is one of the softwares a
Mhm.
lot of times people will use to get feedback, and then that could create some kind of loop. You could text people. I mean, oh my gosh, there's so many ways. You could have the audience text something that would lead them to different ways of referring or different calls to action as well. It depends on
No,
your
it makes
strategy.
sense. And how would I ask for referrals from a host?
Oh, I always, thank them. Like it was so great having it was such an honor speaking at your event. If you have any other organizations that need speakers, I always welcome your referral if you feel comfortable introducing me. I would appreciate that you could say something like that. I mean, this could be as you know, you're the tech genius in this conversation here. You would have that set up ahead of time. You could do that. So you don't need to recreate the wheel every single time. That would be another way. You could
One of the
also
things that oh, go ahead.
oh, you could set that up at the beginning when you first meet them and they've agreed to book you. You can say, "Would it be okay if we talked afterwards and or would you feel comfortable referring me to other places if it goes well?" You don't want to put the pressure on them if they haven't even seen you in action yet, but that's another way.
I'll share something with everyone that we used to do when I was a financial advisor, and it was a guaranteed way to get referrals. Would you want to know my guaranteed way to
Yeah,
get
let's hear
referrals?
it. I want to hear it.
All right. So if I go and I um, talk, let's say for instance, I met with a doctor at a hospital, right, and I'm trying to get him as a financial advisory client, right? I would go on the hospital's website and pull 10 other doctors off, right? And I would take that list in to the meeting with the person I already have the meeting with, right? And instead of saying, can you refer me to other doctors? I would just bring out my list and say, hey, I'm going to be calling these guys. Do you mind if I tell them that you and I met?
Great. Love
And
it.
it removed all the pressure because they don't have to call them or give me their number. I'm calling them anyway, right? I just want to be able to tell them that I met with you today, Lisa. And he's like, yeah, you can tell them we met. This was great. Cool. So now when I reach out, I'm not going to say Lisa told me to call, right? I'm going to say, hey, I was in a meeting with Lisa the other day. Your organization came up or you came up, and I figured I would reach out to you since you all knew each other.
Love it.
And I think you can do that with any type of association. Just bring the
Yes.
list of the associations you want to speak at and ask the host, hey, I'm going to be speaking there. I mean, I'm going to be calling these. Is there anybody you suggest that I should reach out to? Or should I mention, do you have any objection to me mentioning that I spoke here? They're like, no, tell them I. And they may tell you, oh, no, call John over there. I know John. Or call Wesley or Deborah. So I think that's my, well, I know that was my guaranteed way of a poor kid from East St. Louis who knew nobody with money getting in front of doctors who had more money than everybody I knew in
Love
order to
it.
sell them insurance. So
Well, I'll share the girl who grew up in Fairbanks, Alaska's story on how she got referrals and doesn't have to cold call for any speaking engagement.
go ahead, sure. I want to hear it. Come
The girl is me, by the way, if you hadn't caught that. So yeah, I grew up in Fairbanks, Alaska, and one of the things about growing up in Alaska is you really rely on other people's kindness because say if you're out in the middle of nowhere, which you don't have to go very far to be, there's no AAA's coming to save you, right? You need to rely on the person who might drive by to help you. Who you could be a very serious situation. So I bring this kindness to Orange County, California, which is where I live, and there's a lot of kind people here too. And what we do is I create relationships with other speakers because one thing people don't realize is that speakers have the information that you're looking for. So I don't need to go hunting and pecking anymore. I mean, you can, but that's another way. If you partner up with other speakers who are doing the similar thing as you, and I call it the speaker soulmate system, then all of a sudden you're exponentially creating those personal introductions, and then the phone gets picked up a lot easier, the appointments get made a lot easier, you get in the door a lot easier, and all of a sudden it just takes a lot of that blood sweat and tears out of the process. It can also, like if you're using a system like Speaker Hub, it can help guide you to where you should start looking so that you're not looking at everything, but you're really being targeted and focused so your time is spent wisely. So there's like there's ways that you can like layer these different strategies on top of each other that really make it powerful.
yeah, I think that's the point, right? I think you hit it home with that there's layers, right? You don't need 5 layers for it to work. You can do 1 layer, but you can compound those things over time. As you master one, add another. As you master that, add another. So we figured out how to get leads out of the audience. We figured out how to get leads from the host. What other way am I missing on how I can turn one gig into 5? Oh, wait a minute. Leads out of the audience, leads from the host, partnering with our speaker soulmate. What else?
Well,
Besides
you
getting
want
caught
to
in the
you
snow, right?
yeah, you want to be in a community of speakers. That's what we do at the International Speaker Network is we meet once a month virtually for the purpose of that virtual handshake. Like all of a sudden you're in the room with a powerful speaker or an inspirational person or someone who's fighting that fight that you're fighting, trying to get out there, get their message heard. Instead of being against each other, we're for each other. And like, how do we
Mhm.
actually create that? What do I say? Like, everyone in the community has the keys to the kingdom. Are they willing to give you the keys? Like, you want to be showing up reliably, consistently, with kindness, with willingness to give, then all of a sudden keys getting thrown at you, right? Like the keys are getting thrown at you. But it's not just like, oh, I showed up once, give me all the keys. No, no, no. It doesn't work like that. You need to like show up, provide value, be generous. And when everyone shows up with that generous spirit, all of a sudden everyone leaves with something, is how I usually see it happen. And this could be an introduction to, like, one of our examples. What One of our client, or not clients, our international speaker network members, he's an author. He coaches all around the world. He partnered with another gal in Australia. They wrote a book together. He asked me to write the foreword. We had met and developed our relationship through the International Speaker Network. He met another woman who helps people get on TV and create their own TV shows. And then he created a whole event where the three of us were highlighted, myself, the TV host person, and his co-author. And then people from the International Speaker Network showed up and came. So it's like, all of a sudden, just by meeting someone in a Zoom room can turn into these other opportunities that we're not seeing. They've made, he helped, the gal who has the TV show generate, I think they had like a six-figure event. So I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities when you're open to meeting other people. I'm a big fan of that, which I know you are too.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the main takeaway that I get from what we've talked about over the last 30 minutes is be selfless, right? It's really like not thinking about what's in it for you, but being open to help other people through kindness. Um, going with a spirit of, hey, I just want to help,
Yeah,
and you'll be surprised how many people will reciprocate that help back to you.
absolutely. And I mean, I see it over and over again. It never gets old. I It has never done me wrong to be consistent and kind. It just still
Yeah,
works.
consistent is consistent and kind. That's like Calvin Klein. It's like the new CK. I'm gonna
Yeah,
get a
that's right.
T-shirt that has the CK like the Calvin Klein thing, and it's gonna say consistent and kind.
I
It's
love it.
that's it. Is there anything else that I'm missing? Because I really liked your book. Is there
Thank you.
any other things that we can summarize here? And people should definitely go get the book. You see it over on the right side. She has to change it to learn the secrets to booking 600
600.
stages instead of 500. You got to
Well,
get version two, second edition, that
I
has
know.
800 stages or
We
something on it.
we did try to change it, but Amazon was not going to do it, because if you change the name of a title, it doesn't like that. So, yeah, it would have had to
I
been
got
another version. If you And I know we're going to have all the links for everyone, but if you're thinking, you're listening to this and you want more tips, you can go to getspeakinggigsnow.com/tips. That'll give you 5 top tips to get more speaking gigs. Um, you'll see an invite into the International Speaker Network if that's speaking to you, no pun intended, but kind of. And so I'm just grateful that I was able to meet you and see and support what you're doing, because you're really shifting the landscape for the speaking industry, Ron.
you. No, I really appreciate that. The way I think about it is I call it counterintelligence, right? And it's kind of like a spy word because I like Mission Impossible and all this spy stuff. But I think there's enough ignorance in the world already, right? And we have to counter that with our intelligence. But most of the time, speakers don't have as good of promoters as the music industry or as the negative energy industries out there may have. So I'm like, well, that's my enemy. My enemy is the negative images, the negative music, the negative self-talk, all of the negative things that I think there's a lot of power in words and we can kind of fight. I would rather fight with the promoting positivity and positive words. So, um, that's my mission, and we're going to keep going down that path. Even though I like to think of myself as someone who stays to myself. Um, I think it's really my responsibility. So, I want to ask you a question. Or do you see yourself as an introvert or an extrovert?
I am probably a little bit of both. I would have always said extrovert. I do absolutely get energy from people, but I have my limits just like everyone else. Eventually I need to go into my own isolatedness and recharge. So it's both. But if I wasn't around people, I would probably shrivel up and die. So I definitely like to be around people.
No, that's important. I mean, and you have that energy, right? You're like and this sounds funny, but I get it. I I always call them, and this isn't an insult, but you just have to bear with me. I call it, and it's the happiest person. They always bring chocolate chip cookies, right? And I can just imagine you being the chocolate chip cookie person that brings the cookies, and and when someone bites into it, you're like, "They're so good, aren't they?" And you know, but
Yeah,
I guess
I
instead
wouldn't
of
bring
that, you
cookies. My cookies would be calorie free because they'd be invisible. I don't like baking, but I do bring here's a little tip I do. I love Spotify and making playlists, and I like to curate them for whoever I'm with. So if they tell me kind of what kind of music they like and what energizes them, I will literally sit there in about 5 minutes, have a really cool playlist for them, and keep the party fun and going, or easy and calm, whatever it is, the mood that they're wanting. Or I might crack a joke or two. So you're right. You're not
see,
too far off.
I knew you would show up. I didn't know what type of gift it was, but I had the image. Like she's one of those people that come and gets excited about seeing the reaction of other people when you've made their day. Now that's a big deal. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to share with us today. Is there any other tips that we're missing about how to get speaking gigs now?
But
Not tomorrow. We
not
want to
not
get
yeah,
speaking gigs
today.
now.
Well, start writing down that list. If there's anything that's getting in your way of saying yes, then write it down and feel free to reach out if you think, gosh, I need support with that. That's what I help people with all day long. If you were meant to be a speaker, I mean, you are feeling it in your bones that you're ready to do this. So don't ignore that. Don't wait till it's too late. You can do this at any time, any age.
No, that's cool. Well, this is great advice from someone who did 83 speaking gigs in their first year. She's done over 600 speaking gigs and has done it by turning one gig into multiples into 50, as she mentioned, without having to do a lot of cold calling. So I think that that's really important, and I appreciate you taking the time to share those tips with us.
Thank you, Ron.